Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is August 1st, 2016, 1st of August, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different things tonight. As promised, we're going to try to get into some domestic issues. We're going to talk about the conventions. We're going to talk about some other issues coming up because our eyes are on action and the potential for action now. This is not something that we want to. Not a time where we want to sit back on our laurels and simply report the news. We've been reporting the news, analyzing the news, that's important, but we now want to start getting active, and we have a number of avenues in which we can do that. We'll be talking about that here in the hour. Now, before we do, I want to encourage you to go to BrandonTurbeville.com. Of course, if you want to listen to Truth on the Tracks, the show is broadcast every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And my work is posted regularly on ActivistPost.com, NaturalBlaze.com, and EraOfWisdom.org. If you want to follow my work specifically, then, of course, BrandonTurbeville.com is where you want to be. That is the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the archive versions of this show, the YouTube videos, the interviews. All that is there. The books tab is there as well. And we've actually had a number of contributing writers that I want to bring to your attention as well. I'll bring that up in a bit. And, of course, there is a book that is available written by me, 36 Reasons Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President. Actually, the entire title is The Difference It Makes, 36 Reasons Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President. And these are, again, 36 real reasons, right? This is not some, questions about her husband's affair. This is questions about her behavior, her votes, her behavior as Secretary of State, as First Lady, as campaigner, as candidate, as senator, all of this stuff, as lawyer, as board member of the Board of Supervisors for Walmart, corporate board. All of these types of things are looked at in the book, and it's free. If you want to go to BrandonTurbeville.com, just go look on the right side of the website. You'll find the PDF of the book. Just click on it. It's free. Take it, read it, share it, spread it around. Do whatever you can. This cackling witch should not be allowed to be president. The book is, of course, as I said, free, so share it around as much as possible. We've only got a few months. This, of course, is not an endorsement of the Donald. We are not endorsing the talking Cheeto. We are just trying to stop the most dangerous individual that we can from getting the office, and that's going to fall within our discussion of action later on. Now, I should mention that the show is being recorded on July 29th for logistical reasons, so that is a Friday. We've got Saturday and Sunday and all of Monday before the show is aired, so there are some developments that could take place in the meantime, so just bear that in mind. If we do have some type of incident and you're listening to the show and that incident is not covered, just bear that in mind. Now, I want to start by talking about Syria, and I want to move to the domestic front and the various different issues that we have to cover there. Now, I want to start actually by looking at Turkey, because I think this is somewhat still in the news, this question of the Turkish coup. Now, in the aftermath of the coup that failed in Turkey, we have President Recep Tayyip Erdogan blaming the United States via the Gulen movement for the coup itself. Now, the Erdogan faction has reacted by arresting members of the government and the military who belong to the nationalist faction and those individuals that hold nationalist sentiment, including groups of political dissidents, Erdogan opponents, and indeed members of the Gulen movement. But as the world is watching Erdogan's faction mop up people that might have stood up as obstacles to his own political agenda in Turkey, the Turkish government is now claiming, or I should say Erdogan is now claiming, that members of the Gulen movement in Turkey were responsible for the shoot down of the Russian jet that resulted in the Russian sanctions and so much international tension, not only between Russia and Turkey, but between Russia and NATO. We have reports coming from Sputnik. This is what Sputnik says. It says, a member of the movement tied to the so-called parallel state linked to prominent Turkish oppositionist Fethullah Gulen, who was involved in killing a Russian pilot over Syria last year, participated in the attempted coup in Turkey. Mayor of the Turkish capital of Ankara, Ibrahim Mele Gökçek, said, Gökçek says, quoted by CNN Turk, it was the parallel state that has deteriorated our relations with Russia. It was an incident in which one of the pilots of this structure has participated. I guarantee it. He was one of the coup's participants. We have not voiced it until now, but I, Mele Gökçek, said that our relations have been deteriorated by these villains, end quote. Erdogan himself has come out and said that the goal of this parallel state was to isolate Turkey on the international scene. We also have the Turkish government detaining 2 Air Force pilots that were allegedly involved in the shoot-down of the jet. Now, we won't go through all of the quotes. I think we've discussed part of this before. But there does exist the possibility, and we want to be clear about this, that an element within the U.S.-supported Gulen movement could have been involved in the coup and the unsanctioned activity within the Turkish military and governmental structure. But we want to point out that it's highly suspicious that the individuals upon whom Erdogan is now cracking down would then be labeled as responsible for elements of Turkish policy that didn't work to Erdogan's benefit or didn't work to Turkey's advantage or its standing in the world. It seems very convenient that after the shoot-down incident, when the Russian sanctions have been crippling Turkey, and the Russians have been showing very clearly that a Turkish threat is not something that's going to keep them from operating in Syria, all of a sudden Erdogan's enemies are the ones being blamed for the strategic blunder and international aggression. After all, if a parallel state had been responsible for the shoot-down of the Russian jet, why didn't Erdogan do something to crack down on those rogue actors at the time? Why didn't he act to smooth things over with the Russians immediately instead of digging his heels in and then justifying the act, both publicly and apparently privately? Even if Erdogan wanted to save face and not appear to be weak, he could have mended fences behind the scenes. Unless, of course, the sanctions were agreed to by Russia so that the Russians could appear like they were taking a tough line. But then Erdogan's apology would have undone all this staunch resistance and all this tough appearance, and that would have largely negated the goal of the plan to begin with. So we don't want to get into the realm of triple-layered conspiracies here, because there's obviously a conspiracy. But if you keep following each one of these lines down, there's a number of issues that are possible, a number of possibilities there that do exist, but it's just extremely difficult to determine which one was the real reason for this coup. And the only way we're going to be able to tell about who was actually behind this coup is to look at at what actions Erdogan is going to take going forward. So we want to talk about that for just a minute. Now, it's been over a week since the Turkish coup has taken place, and still nobody definitively knows what happened. We don't know who was behind it, who originally planned it, or who was meant to benefit. It's rather obvious now that since the coup did not succeed, Erdogan's going to find himself in a much safer position, at least domestically speaking, than before it took place, just by virtue of the massive government and military purge that's taken place in the aftermath. Internationally, that's another question. So, no one fully knows whether or not Erdogan was actually set to benefit from the coup to begin with. Now, was Erdogan behind the coup himself? Was Fethullah Gulen behind the coup? Were the nationalists behind the coup? Did Erdogan and the United States stage the coup together to allow for a crackdown and double down on the nationalist faction? Was the coup actually the work of the United States attempting to overthrow Erdogan over his previous moves toward warming relations with Russia? All of these questions have been asked, but none of them have yielded any definitive answer as of yet. What is certain is that Erdogan's behavior in the weeks after the coup again, as I said, are going to tell us more about who was actually behind it. Now, while it's still too early to tell who organized it or to even fully analyze Erdogan's behavior, we do have some developments which are notable. For instance, on August 9th, Erdogan is expected to travel to St. Petersburg, Russia, in order to take part in talks with Vladimir Putin for the purposes of speeding up the repair of Turkish-Russian relations. And announcing the August 9th visit, we had Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Mehmet Şimşek stating that Russia, quote, isn't just our close and friendly neighbor, but also a strategic partner. Şimşek also says, today we are here to normalize the situation in our relations as soon as possible at an accelerated pace since they were disrupted on November 24th. Of course, he's referring to the shoot down on the Russian jet. So, we also have this question of the political realignment. I don't think we'll go into this too much, but we have reports from mainstream news organizations, and we recognize that the mindset, or I guess the perspective that's going to come out of the mainstream news organizations are going to present us with something that's, of course, favorable to the Anglo-American establishment. But organs like Bloomberg News, right? We have the question over what the real role and position of Russia might have been during the coup attempt itself. Now, Turkey in recent days has been heaping praise on Russia for its support during the coup. In fact, Şimşek emphasized Turkey's gratitude to Russia at the talks with Dvorkovich on restoring economic ties. He says, you supported democracy, supported the government. Thank you very much. Turkey allegedly received, quote, unconditional support, end quote, from Russia over the coup attempt. And that is coming from Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu when he gave an interview to Haberturk TV on Monday, this past Monday. He also said that anti-U.S. sentiment is rising in the country after the failed coup. Now, last month, Putin ordered the Russian government to begin lifting sanctions on Turkey that had been imposed as a result of the shoot-down after Erdogan sent a letter of sympathy and profound condolences to the family of the pilot who died when Turkey shot his plane down. Putin had previously accused Turkey of stabbing Russia in the back for downing the jet, and then Russia retaliated with a ban on charter flights and sanctions on imports of some of the Turkish fruits and vegetables, which has been hurting Turkey. Russia came out publicly with accusations about Erdogan's family being involved in illegal oil trading with the Islamic State. Turkey rejected that charge, but of course we've covered it here on a number of occasions, and we've got articles about it. It's true, right? They are involved in oil trading with ISIS. Now, here's something else that's interesting. Turkey has confirmed interest in resuming the Turkish Stream gas pipeline project, and that is coming from Alexander Medvedev, who's the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Gazprom, PJSC, and he told reporters this much, right, after he took part in talks between the Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak and Zebekci. This is a decision on an agreement is going to be made after Putin and Erdogan meet. That is what Medvedev says. Those talks were originally shelved on this Black Sea pipeline link that would make Turkey a linchpin in Europe's energy supplies by 2020, according to them, as the question over Syria began to heat up. But now the questions about this pipeline are back in the news because these Turkey and Russia are now considering reopening the idea and reopening the project. Now, on the other hand, Turkey is continuing to launch accusations against the United States and continuing to demand, to no avail, that Fethullah Gulen be extradited. In fact, some sources in Turkey has even pointed the finger at U.S. commander of the International Security Assistance Force, that is a NATO-led security mission in Afghanistan, as the organizer of the coup. They are pointing out General John F. Campbell as the ringleader of the coup. Now we have, again, former U.S. commander of the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, being accused of being the organizer of the July 15th military coup. According to pro-Erdogan Turkish newspaper Yeni Şafak, we have Campbell managing and organizing the coup itself and the soldiers behind the coup. According to sources who are close to, quote, ongoing legal process of pro-coup detainees, right? Sources, I guess lawyers maybe, or individuals who might be privy to those types of discussions, if they still have lawyers in Turkey. Campbell, according to this newspaper, managed more than $2 billion worth of money transactions via UBA Bank in Nigeria by using CIA links to distribute that money among the pro-coup military personnel in Turkey. The ongoing investigation, and it's not clear if this is a governmental investigation or a journalistic one, revealed that Campbell had paid at least 2 secret visits to Turkey since May, until the day of the coup attempt. The coup plot, again, this is according to Yeni Şafak, was foiled by the effort of Turkey's government itself, including its citizens, the politicians, the media and police forces, and that it was organized by the Fethullah terrorist organization, FETÖ, led by Fethullah Gulen, right, who's living in the United States. There was military sources, Turkish military sources, saying that Campbell had made some top secret meetings in Erzurum military base and Adana Incirlik Air Base. And the Incirlik, of course, is the base that's being used by the United States for its bombing missions in Syria. These military sources are saying that Campbell was the man who directed the process of trending and blacklisting the military officers in the base. If the coup attempt was successful, according to these sources by Yeni Şafak, Campbell would visit Turkey in a short time. The Nigeria branch of the United Bank of Africa was the main base for the last 6 months of money transactions for the coup plotters. Now, millions of dollars, again, according to Yeni Şafak, has been transferred from Nigeria to Turkey by a group of CIA personnel. They say that the money, which has been distributed to an 80-person special team of the CIA, was used to convince pro-coup generals, and that, again, $2 billion of this was used to that effort. Apparently, the CIA team hand-delivered this money after taking it out of their bank accounts to the pro-coup military fighters, or to the what they refer to as terrorists under the military dresses. So it's not clear if they're referring to some type of proxy force or if they're referring to the pro-military coup participants as terrorists. It could be either way. In that sense, it's not terribly significant. So that's what Yeni Şafak is saying. Now, in the Persian Gulf, we're seeing accusations that are starting to circulate with Qatar. This is interesting. Qatar's Minister of State for Defense, this Khalid al-Attiyah, says that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates supported the coup. Al-Attiyah says, quote, on his Twitter page, this document, which he posted this on his Twitter page, this document reveals that a Saudi emir and a top Emirati military official have been aware in advance of an imminent plot to topple the Turkish president through their participation in the Anatolian Eagle maneuvers held last May. However, they were refrained from informing the Turkish authorities. That was what the Twitter post said. According to the document, that the coup was scheduled for August but took place on July 15th. So we've got now infighting with the GCC. Fallout's taking place in Europe as well with the EU. The EU is warning Erdogan that his reaction to the coup might jeopardize his chances of being admitted into the EU. In fact, Brussels has warned that if Turkey decides to go ahead with its reinstatement of the death penalty with the putschists, its bid for membership would be effectively over. So apparently you can kill people overseas, but not at home. I love these European morals. It's also funny to see Europe condemn Turkey for jailing journalists as they send 90-year-old women to prison for merely questioning the Holocaust. And if you believe in a free media or a free speech, then that's the pot calling the kettle black, if I've ever seen one. Europe should get the mote out of its own eye before it criticizes Turkey on that issue. Of course, we also condemn Turkey's jailing of journalists as well. Now, we have these recent developments, right? That's a greater trend toward Russia, clearly. Continued shaky relations with Europe and the United States. Yeah, not as clear, but they tend to appear to be that way. If this is the case, then this lends credence to claims by those suggesting that the coup was initiated by the West, the United States in particular, as a response to Turkey's recent warming of relations with Russia. These individuals are claiming that the U.S., in fear that they were losing an ally and useful pawn in the war against Syria and Russia, attempted to overthrow Erdogan and replace him with a more amenable government, or at the very least frighten Erdogan into playing ball. Now, Mimi Allaham, also known as Syrian Girl or Partisan Girl, I've got a long quote from her in my article, Turkey Warms to Russia. You can Google that or go to the site and search it. This is her argument. She believes that it is indeed a coup that was launched by the United States because they were afraid that Turkey was abandoning the Anglo-American empire in favor of Russia, in favor of the pipeline, in favor of better relationships with an actual neighbor, and the lack of desire to see a Kurdistan created. We've also got other writers and researchers who say, no, that maybe this isn't necessarily true, that maybe this was something that was created by Erdogan and the United States together in order to purge nationalistic elements from the Turkish government and military. But again, as I said early on, you cannot tell who was behind this coup at this point. What we have to look at is the direction in which Turkey is moving. Is it moving closer to Russia, Iran, China, possibly even some elements of Europe? Well, it is moving closer to Russia. Again, that tends to lend credence to the idea that it was a U.S.-backed coup after all. Have they shut down diplomatic relations? Not yet. That seems to be something that would be done if this was truly a U.S.-backed coup. Have they shut down Incirlik? They have not. That also seems something that would be done if this were legitimately created by the United States. Still, Turkey is moving toward Russia, clearly, with the pipeline talk and with the recent talks, the praise that Turkey has been heaping upon Russia, the support that Russia gave Turkey allegedly during the coup itself. All of this does matter. So we're kind of right back where we started, but we are seeing Turkey move closer to Russia, which indicates to us that there may have indeed been an American involvement in the coup that maybe Erdogan wasn't a part of. So we're going to have to withhold judgment, withhold declarations, but we will have to look at this again in the near future to see what exactly has taken place here. Now, on to the Houthi rebels. This is something that this is good news. The war in Syria, of course, is continuing to rage, and all of the media attention here in the United States is focused on the Cheeto versus the witch election fraud, and then the Turkish coup, of course, which nobody really understands. But in Yemen, there are some positive developments, at least in terms of military developments. The Saudis, of course, along with the Qataris, along with the Emiratis, and the backing of the United States, have launched an invasion of Yemen, but the Houthis, this scrappy little band of rebels, have managed to not only launch a counter attack against the Saudis, not only launch an attack against Saudi Arabia that has cost them in manpower, has cost them equipment, has cost them planes and helicopters. The Houthis have managed to invade Saudi Arabia. That's right. The Houthis have invaded Saudi Arabia. We have a story. This is a story that went virtually unreported in the West, and we've been meaning to make note of it here on this show. But that the Houthis managed to wrest control of 3 Saudi military bases in Saudi Arabia's Jizan province. This is located near the Saudi-Yemen border. But they did this at the beginning of the year, in January. The bases are Jabal al-Dud, Al-Aril, and Madba. All of these were seized by Houthi forces and fighters who are allied with them, known as the Allied Popular Committees. In addition to this, the Houthi forces, along with loyal Yemeni soldiers to Saleh, launched, and to their country in general, have launched retaliatory shelling strikes against Saudi Arabia's Al-Makrouk military base in the southern Najran region. So not only have they invaded and seized 3 military bases, they are shelling inside Saudi Arabia now. We know that the Houthis and Yemeni fighters have long been inflicting heavy damage on the Saudis and the Saudi-led coalition troops and vehicles deployed on the ground inside Yemen, as well as occasionally downing coalition jets. But the fighters have also managed to damage Saudi ships that are located off the coast. In July of this month, 2016, the Houthi forces are launching ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia as well. We have reports coming from Al-Masdar that the Houthis launched a Tochka ballistic missile toward the Ahad al-Mansariya military camp, which has resulted in a heavy death toll of Saudi soldiers, as well as the destruction of several armored vehicles. The Houthis don't typically fire missiles into Saudi Arabia, but the recent battles that have been taking place along the Yemeni-Saudi border, they have done so. The Houthis appear to be on the verge of expelling Saudi forces from central Yemen. We have military sources talking to Saba, which is the Yemeni news agency, reporting that the Houthi forces have taken control of the Al-Shaur area and secured all roads in the region. Now, Al-Shaur is located at the northern side of the Hazm al-Udain region, and the Al-Udain district. The district Al-Udain is the last district in the Ibib governorate that is under the Hadi loyalist control. So they've almost liberated this entire area. Before the Houthis arrive at Ibib, Al-Udain was considered one of Al-Qaeda's primary strongholds, since it had a large militant presence there because of the mountainous terrain and the Yemeni's region, the Yemeni's military negligence early on. But now the Houthi forces and the allies are launching an operation to drive out the remaining Hadi loyalist pockets in Al-Udain in an attempt to fully secure Ibib governorate, and of course they will likely do that. They're kicking Al-Qaeda out as well. This entire affair, Houthi forces have revealed the Saudis as being what they are, which is nothing more than a military paper tiger, which is incapable of actually defeating a rebel force in a neighboring country. After this string of victories and the fact that Houthi and the Houthi allied forces have actually managed to successfully invade Saudi territory, Saudi Arabia's weakness appears to be even greater than what many informed observers may have suspected. Now, I even predicted that Saudi Arabia would lose the battle in Yemen on military terms, and but the invasion of Saudi Arabia is something that has caught a lot of people by surprise, simply because of the nature of of what an invasion actually is. And this is quite an important development. It could be seen early on that the Saudis would fold in their battle on Yemeni territory, but most people didn't see that the Yemenis would actually go so far as to invade. So one of the questions, there's little doubt that Saudi Arabia is going to have to deploy a number of troops on its border so it can slow the Houthi advance into Saudi Arabia. But assuming that it's actually able to do so, we have another question, and that question is, how long will it be before disgruntled elements within Saudi Arabia realize that the force that has been oppressing them for so long is not even capable of defending itself against a ragged group of determined revolutionaries in another country? How long will it be before these elements decide it's their turn to challenge the monarchy? And when they do, what will be the result of that? Now look at Syria. We want to jump over to Syria because we've got to get to the United States domestic stuff as well. We have some interesting developments. What the hell is going on with the Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party? On June 23rd of this month, we had the Daily Star reporting that the SSNP announced that it was going to hold a vote next month, in August, in order to choose a new leader after a party tribunal has rejected the re-election of the incumbent, Assad Hardan. Now, there's a movement inside the SSNP which calls itself the Movement of July 8th, and this has worked to overthrow Hardan. The opposition to his re-election is criticizing him for his policy towards the leadership in Syria. Basically, he's being criticized for his support of Syria in its war against the Anglo-European, Anglo-American imperialism. It's an idea that's supposed to be a basic principle of the SSNP itself, which is unity of Syria, sovereignty of Syria. In fact, you can read that in their own documents. The aim of the Syrian Socialist National Party, you can read their basic principles and you'll see that. But in order to make it appear like they're being reasonable, the SSNP is attempting to present Hardan as a government agent, essentially, an Assad agent, by saying that Hardan is supporting the Syrian government, and then going on to criticize the relationship between Hardan and the government and saying that the SSNP is a secular socialist party, not a sectarian or Alawite party. Well, of course, that they use those words, Alawite or sectarian, is just a sneaky way to abandon Syria and all of Syrians under a false pretext. The Syrian government isn't Alawite, and it's not sectarian, and we've proven this time and time again. The specific use of language is the same way that the United States has used that language, and the so-called rebels have used that language. The idea is to present the Syrian government and Syrian society as being comprised of sects in order to misrepresent both and divide everybody amongst themselves in Syria. Another tactic that's being used by these critics inside the SSNP is to claim that Hardan is too concerned with what is happening inside Syria and that he should focus on the war with Israel. Well, this is a clear attempt to force the SSNP to stop fighting with the Syrian government against terrorists, because who could ever separate the war on Syria from Israel? So even the most naive people, the ones who might not even belong to any party or any education, should be able to recognize this. You don't have to be Syrian or Arab to know anything about Syria's or know anything about Syria's history in order to recognize what they're trying to do here. So without a doubt, after over 5 years of war, it's got to be clear to everybody that this is a war that's not against one sect. It's a war waged by deception. It's a proxy war against the unity of Syria and the whole region for Israel's benefit and the creation of Greater Israel. The critics of Hardan appear to be, well, what can we say, tools of the United States. The U.S. has its own agenda, obviously, which involves the shredding of Syria, the creating of the Rojava, northern Syria, Kurdistan. And this opposition faction in the SSNP also supports this idea of a Kurdistan in northern Syria. So the idea here, and we can go into this, that the Kurds are fighting along with U.S.-backed forces. They're fighting along with the Syrian Democratic Forces. They're fighting along with terrorists. we can see why the United States is interested in working with the SSMP, because they can manipulate it and then further divide the Syrian opposition, and I mean opposition to Western aims. In other words, wherever the United States praises a party or attempts to work closely with it, it is not for a good reason. It's always so that they can use that party in the war, or somehow use them at the negotiating table when it wants to wrest some type of political solution from the countries that the United States is trying to destroy. So here's the plan. The U.S. is investing in its time and interest in using the SSMP against Syria and the Ba'ath Party. They want to do this in the future, but they can't do it right now because they have a pro-Syria leader like Assad Hardan. The opposition faction within the SSMP, like Hardan's critics, tend to support the federalization of Syria and the creation of a Kurdistan within Syrian territory. These individuals can indeed be useful to the United States. Andrew Koribko, in an article for Ketehan, The Democratic Partition of Syria. This is an interesting article. He points out that the U.S. establishment seems always on the verge of accepting the SSMP as a legitimate party in Syria, which is extraordinarily odd because it is, to this point, only held out this right for so-called terrorists or moderate rebels, moderate terrorists, that it and its regime change coalition support. So the Ba'ath Party, for people who might not be following this, remember the Ba'ath Party got a bit of a bad name, and they're not great, mind you, but they got a bit of a bad name in the first Gulf War when the United States propaganda was coming out that the Ba'ath Party was actually the same party that Hitler used in World War II. This is absolutely stupid. It's not true at all. It's mental gymnastics at best to make this up. But the Ba'ath Party is a mixture of Arab nationalism and pan-Arabism, Arab socialism, anti-imperialism. It calls for the unification of the Arab world into a single state, and its motto is unity, liberty, socialism. Well, very French, isn't it? But it refers to Arab unity and freedom from non-Arab interference and control. Despite all of the U.S. treachery, the Ba'ath Party and the SSMP have a mutual interest, and that's the unity and sovereignty of Syria. And hopefully, within the SSMP, the opposition that's there, that's currently against Hardan, and they're falling into the hands of the United States, are not going to exceed in assisting the division of Syria and the Syrian people. The U.S. has made a lot of attempts to destroy Syria from the inside, whether it's proxy terrorists, the Syrian Democratic Forces, federalization, or now corrupting and infiltrating a Syrian political party like the SSMP. The U.S. hasn't given up on its attempt to destroy the secular government of Syria. The Syrian constitution welcomes every political party, and it does not base recognition on religion. Syria needs all of those parties to work together right now. And if the SSMP is working with the U.S., if it is working with the U.S., it needs to be revealed. So we call on people to investigate this, but we also call on the SSMP. Now is not the time to break ranks. Now is the time to work with the Ba'ath Party to do whatever you can to get the imperialists out of your country. Syria should not be divided. It must not be divided. Now, since we're still talking about Syria, I want to draw your attention to two articles that were written and that posted now on BrandonTurbeville.com by two different famous, successful, well-known artists, extraordinarily talented individuals. And the first was posted on July 24th, entitled Western Charity, The Selling, Trading, and Weaponization of Syria's Children by Diane Mantsaris. Diane wrote this article for this website, for BrandonTurbeville.com. She's an Australian artist that's known for her pioneering application of digital imaging to printmaking and for her unconventional approach to image making, which is often both personal and political in content. Mantsaris pioneered the use of computers as a printmaking and art-making tool in the early to mid-1980s, exhibiting widely, nationally, and throughout Asia, and touring exhibitions to considerable acclaim. Her practice now crosses into several fields associated with the visual arts: printmaking, drawing, photography, sculpture, performance, and public art. She is represented in most state and public collections throughout Australia and significant private collections throughout Asia and Europe. She was drawn into action over Syria while watching the events unfold with colleagues in Aleppo. That's her bio. She wrote this article. It's an extremely good article. It's got great reception. But this is, again, an extraordinarily talented artist who is now speaking out against the war on Syria. Likewise, I would draw your attention to another article that was written specifically for BrandonTurbeville.com by Haneen Elias. She's, again, another extremely talented, famous artist who wrote an article on July 29th entitled "In the Name of Freedom." And this is about her experiences growing up as a child in Syria. Now, she's German, daughter of a Syrian doctor and a German doctor's assistant, right? So she has Syrian heritage. She spent her childhood in Damascus and Aleppo. She's the co-founder of the band Atari Teenage Riot, founder of Fatal Recordings, political activist. She toured with Rage Against the Machine, Wu-Tang Clan, 9 Inch Nails. She's also released an album under the name Fantôme entitled It All Makes Sense. She's released 13 albums as a solo artist. You should go check out her music too. But check out that article, In the Name of Freedom. So we are getting more and more positive feedback, not only on what we're doing, but encouraging others to stand up and speak out as well. So if you don't think that we are having an effect, just look at that. We have two famous artists now speaking out against the war in Syria and posting those articles to BrandonTurbeville.com. And of course, you're welcome to share those articles around and repost them if you like, with proper attribution to the author and the publishing site. Please do that. Now, we are having an effect, and we're going to talk about what else we can do. I want to touch on one more issue, though. Germany, since we're working our way back to the United States. The Munich shootings, the bodies of the Munich shootings were barely cold before we had these German authorities and politicians who were out calling for a bigger police state and a further clampdown on access to guns in Germany. We had Bavarian Interior Minister Joachim Herrmann, who is now pushing for going so far as to revise the German constitution so that limits placed on using the military domestically can be removed, allowing the German military to be used inside Germany for large-scale terrorist situations. The limits on Germany's military were put in place after World War II, and in response to Germany's experience with the Nazi regime, with its genocide and violence and totalitarianism, its excesses. Herrmann states that Germany is an absolutely stable democracy, and because it's an absolutely stable democracy, Germans should be perfectly fine with having their military deployed on German streets. We also have Baden-Württemberg's interior minister hinting at the possibility of changing the German constitution in a manner that's similar to what Herrmann suggested. The Social Democrats and the Greens have criticized the statements, but we now see that Germans are being forced to listen to argument that Germany's already oppressive gun laws need to be tightened even more, and that's restricting an already highly restricted population's access to firearms and a means to defend themselves from crime and the possibility of a tyrannical government, which are, ironically, concepts Germans should be quite familiar with. But still, we have Vice Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel stating that even stricter laws are needed in regard to gun ownership and the access to weapons. He says, we need to do everything further possible to curb the access to deadly weapons and strictly control them. How can it be that an unstable or possibly even mentally ill 18-year-old comes into possession of a firearm? Good question. Good question. Another good question. It was a decommissioned firearm. Who the hell commissioned it? That's another question. They should ask that. An 18-year-old who's mentally ill recommissioned the firearm they didn't have access to? Makes a lot of sense. The question, of course, was not asked of Gabriel, how it could be that a government which demands that its citizens be unarmed and defenseless on the promise that their government will keep them safe has allowed the country to turn into a hot spot for mass shootings, stabbings, and other form of terrorist attacks. If that's a social contract, you broke it, Gabriel. You broke it, Germany. So let the people have their guns. And we call on the German people, of course, to do a number of things. when we know that this communo-fascist element of the German government that's trying to seize upon the crisis, whether it's real or engineered by intelligence agencies in order to push for a greater totalitarian control over the German people. They're not letting this crisis go to waste. So we want to call on the German people to do a couple of things. First is, if you want to stop the terrorist attacks, demand that your government stop funding them and supporting them in places like Syria and Libya and beyond, and of course domestically. So expose and demand the support for these terrorists. Also, stop being afraid of being labeled a racist or a xenophobe. The people who are labeling you with this have a racial obsession, and it generally comes from either one of two things: a racism of their own or an inferiority complex of their own. It has nothing to do with you. So oppose these ridiculously white guilt, European guilt, German guilt-based immigration policies. Now, of course, be smart enough not to turn your anger and hatred on the immigrants themselves. They're simply looking for a better life, as you would be doing if you were in that situation. But that doesn't mean you have to put up with this type of situation. And of course, third, we want to suggest that you start demanding not only that they don't pass further gun restrictions, but that they remove the restrictions that they have so you can defend yourselves. And this is going to require you to go on the offensive. We'll probably talk more about that later. So that is Germany, and let's hop on over to the United States, if we can, for as long as we can. We just had the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. And there was, of course, I guess we should say there's been less violence outside of the conventions than we perhaps thought there would be, especially given the fact that it's in Cleveland and Philadelphia, two of the most violence-ridden cities in the country. Well, especially Philadelphia. I don't know how Cleveland ranks, but Philly's up there. So we had the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, a clown show on both sides of the spectrum. There was violence, of course, at both of these events. I think there were protesters. These I don't think they were BLM, but they were communist protesters. We saw Alex Jones get attacked or get pushed in the at the RNC. We saw Abby Martin get illegally detained and taken to a detention center, an arrest that's not really an arrest, I guess, at the DNC. So police oppression abounds, lack of freedom of speech, violence from the participants. All of this is par for the course in 2016. We expected the violence. We saw violence. We expected the crackdown on free speech. We saw the crackdown on free speech. We expected the police state. We saw the police state. Now, as for the conventions themselves, we have the Ted Cruz speech, which apparently either sealed his political career forever or gave him the opportunity to come back in 2020, which is probably what he was hoping for. A contentious situation at the convention regarding Donald Trump. The Republicans did not nominate anyone else. They did not put up a second option for the nomination. So it was contentious. There was an attempt to change rules at the last minute, apparently to prevent Trump. That failed. And obviously that's where we're at. Now the Cheeto has the nomination for the Republicans. And on the DNC side, if you wanted to see a convention that was fraught with distaste and uproar, look at the Democratic National Convention. Now this is where Bernie Sanders was not even able to unburden himself of his supporters by simply throwing them under the bus. Bernie had to lay down under the bus and pay someone to run over him to get it across. I mean, his own supporters, he's told his own supporters to vote for the cackling witch over and over and over. He said that he's going to support Clinton. Remember, to begin with, we're going to fight to the very end. We're going to take this all the way to the convention, and then we're going to fight on the floor of the convention. The day before the convention, what does he say? Vote for Hillary. Vote for the cackling witch. This whole thing has been a fraud, just like we told you it would be. He's a steam valve. That's all he was. Such as he may be, still just a steam valve. So Bernie lied about being a fighter. Bernie lied about his anti-war record, for one thing. Bernie lied about a lot of things. So he dragged a lot of well-meaning leftists with him, particularly millennials, who are not interested in voting for the cackling witch. So when we go to the convention, we see Bernie doing everything he can to convince his supporters to vote for Hillary. Now, those votes have obviously been cast, and the witch has won. The Wicked Witch of the West is now the nominee. So we have to hear her horrendous voice, unfortunately, I believe, for the next 4 years, because we have Donald Trump, which I've said earlier on was going to be nothing more than the right-wing push for Hillary Clinton. And by that, I mean that he is trying to, he's put in this position to say inflammatory things so that Hillary Clinton could somehow look more sane or more reasonable. So now, my message to Bernie supporters is this. It's over. Bernie sold you out. You should have seen that coming, whether you did or whether you didn't. Bernie Sanders sold you out. He didn't plan anything. He doesn't have a plan up his sleeve. It's over. So you need to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and think about what plan B might be. Where do you go from here? Well, I have some ideas, and I have the answers for you. And the first thing is not to be steered and directed and prodded into voting for the cackling witch. Whatever your principles might be, I guarantee you, if you voted for Bernie Sanders, if you supported Bernie Sanders, it's not Hillary. She doesn't show your principles. She doesn't have principles, much less she doesn't have yours. Now, does that mean necessarily that you should vote for Donald Trump? No, it doesn't. I'm not telling you to vote for Donald Trump. I would never do that. We don't endorse Donald Trump either. So, what can you do outside of voting for the Democrats or the Republicans? Well, I would suggest, if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, to look at Jill Stein of the Green Party. She has, I think she calls it a Green New Deal. Now, this is not my platform. This is not the 43 points. But I want to point out to you that if there are elements of Bernie Sanders in Jill Stein. In fact, I would argue that there's more Bernie Sanders in Jill Stein than there is in Bernie Sanders. You should go look at her platform. And if you're interested in voting, if you're going to vote, of course you can always not vote at all. But if you're interested in voting, I would suggest go and cast your vote for the Green Party. Vote for Jill Stein. Now, if you're in one of the states where the Green Party is unfortunately not on the ballot, then you should look at the Libertarian Party. Don't vote for the Republican or the Democrat. Step one, get out of that paradigm immediately. Go cast your vote. If Hillary Clinton wins this election, if she becomes president, you can hang it up, because that sends a message that you people mean nothing. That says to the Democratic Party that we can win without you. We'll continue to go to our ethnocentric minorities. We'll continue to play on this false sense of support that's been provided to minorities. We'll continue to go after the gender wars. We'll continue to go after the traditional Democrats and the Bernie Sanders supporters who want to see debt forgiven, want to see jobs, want to see higher wages, etc., the end of the war on drugs. You guys are going to get left by the wayside, because if they can win without you, they will. So you have to show them that they cannot win without you, and make sure that Hillary Clinton loses this election. And you can put your vote to the Green Party, you can put your vote to the Libertarian Party. If you're very upset, you don't even have to put your vote anywhere. Just don't put it for Hillary Clinton. Now, the question about what we can do from here, this is something that, again, I have an answer for you. Go to BrandonTurbeville.com and type in, there's a search bar to the top left-hand corner of the website. Go up there and type in 43 points. And there's an article that says, A Real New Deal for America, 43 points. This is a platform. This is a list of demands. It's not complete, but it is a list of demands. And again, we will complete, we will, add and tweak these points as we go forward, and we'll add a few more. These are very general, by the way, but they're 43 points. Take a look at them. If you want an idea of what you can demand, there we go. It's the 43 points. An end to the war on drugs, period. No more locking people up for possessing marijuana, LSD, shrooms, cocaine, none of it. It's done. The government does not have a right to tell people what they can and can't put in their bodies. Who the hell do you think you are that you can tell someone else that they can't consume something because you don't agree with it or you think it's harmful to them? These are the types of things, right? We have, again, 43 points that I encourage you to go take a look at and work toward. I mentioned earlier the two artists who wrote about, one, their experiences with Syria, and the other, their research with Syria. This is the kind of influence that we're having now. The influence not only of the alternative media, but the artistic community, the music community, and, of course, the general public, which is what we need to be looking toward, and we need to build on this influence. So I want to thank everybody who's emailed me in the past telling me what they're working on and how they're working on getting these demands made and hopefully implemented. Now, some of the most important things we want to mention economically speaking is we want a 1% Wall Street sales tax for revenue generation, and that will bring in trillions of dollars worth of revenue. You want universal health care? There it is. You want Social Security, unemployment insurance, food stamps? There it is. You want funding for education? There it is. We also want the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. This seize the Fed, not in the Fed, seize the Fed, and then use the credit-creating power of the Fed to jumpstart a new deal, right? The repair of our infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's tunnels, whatever it is. And, of course, we want an end to free trade. That's economically speaking. Domestically, we want things like the end to the war on drugs. We want full restoration of the Second Amendment. We support gun rights 100%. We want to ban GMOs. Foreign policy, we want to end the war on Syria and the war on Libya. If you're interested in this, whether you're a Bernie supporter, whether you're a libertarian, whether you're a socialist, whether you're a green, whether you're a yellow or a purple, we don't care. We want to work with you. If you agree with the things that I've just said, then go to BrandonTurbeville.com, take a look at the 43 points, send me an email, let me know what you're doing to make this happen, and you're also going to have to start making connections with other activist organizations who are interested in making these same points work, and making those demands and making them happen. We're going to talk much more.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.